Able to join. All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our fourth event in our Equity in the Workplace series. It's so great to see you all again, for those who I've seen before, or welcome to the series for those of you that are just joining us. I feel like a little bit of a game show host with these weekly series, so I'll introduce myself again. I am your host of the series, Sarah Moore, legal counsel and business development here at BenefitBump. And I thought for today we would do something a little bit different from the previous session. So I'm hoping that you all will all humor me this morning. So I'm actually going to turn off my camera. And I think, Cam, if you want to turn yours off too, I'm hoping that we're going to do a little exercise. So everyone is going to close their eyes and we're going to go on a little bit of a journey. And I won't know if you're doing it because your cameras are off, but I'd super appreciate the participation if you want to join. So go ahead, really close your eyes. And I want you to imagine that you're 28 years old. You've been at your job for about 3 years. You're married. You enjoy your work and your colleagues, even though some days are better than others. You are starting to be a super valuable asset to the team. And one day your significant other comes to you and says, "Hey, what do you think about adding a baby to our family? I think it's time." And you internalize that and you think, that makes sense. Sure. I know it's going to be challenging, but people do it all the time, right? So it can't be that hard. And it isn't, because you had someone to help walk you through available resources to guide you through what can be sometimes a daunting life event. And in addition, imagine that you had a community of people at your organization to support you, give you helpful tips and tricks, and that there are even events put on by your organization to support you and demonstrate to you that you are a valuable member of the team, even while taking time off to grow your family. And that's what we're here to do. So we can turn our screens back on and open our eyes. And I'm just so excited, Cam, that you're joining us this morning. Thank you so much. Cam is the head of community at Kunik and is going to discuss with us this morning how employee resource groups can boost morale and community building in the workplace. So Cam, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate that, Sarah. And am very, very excited to speak with you all today. Really, really appreciative of BenefitBump for having us here today and getting to introduce you to Kunik, but more importantly, talk about all the different assets and tools that a company can use to try and help support their caregivers and their caregiving community by building a greater inclusive community itself. So that's what we're here to do. As you see with the title slide there, we're looking to boost retention and morale through community building. And it is our core belief at Kunik that community is the very heart of an organization. And it drives the ethos, it drives the work, it drives the success that you will have. And as we'll point out here through the course of this presentation, the most important, and as everybody here will clearly already know, the most important assets that you have within a company are your employees. So making sure that you can support them in the most whole way possible is always the best way to service your entire group. So this is us at Kunik. We are, from our very core, a caregiver-focused organization. We were founded by a pair of really passionate founders who were working in finance at the time, looked around and said, there's really no support for working caregivers in this space. And so they went out and they created it themselves. We are, by our very nature, a digital network. So we are a 24/7 on-demand digital network of resources, discussions, and caregiver support that exists online for all of our partner organizations, and where people can both revisit sessions that we host that are like this, but also other tips, tricks, and other resources that people have that cut across both who they are as caregivers, but also who they are as the whole person. And that's what we try to demonstrate here. So when we view people, we really increasingly focus on the intersectionalities of who they are. So, traditionally, when people have been looking, when organizations have looked to try and find out who their people are, they look in these kind of general categories. So, traditional gender roles, ethnicity, whether they're a parent or not. And at the end of the day, that really neglects the larger, deeper undercurrents of all the different things that intersect to make who they are, right? So, in this example, you can see somebody who we often like to call Ruth, who's not just a woman, but obviously she's, in this case, she's a Hispanic woman. She's a manager. She has all these different stresses and influences that impact who she is, the way she thinks, and the way she views her own world. And key among that is her role as a caregiver. So, why do we focus on caregivers? The example, or the reason, excuse me, is very, very simple. Caregivers are the single largest population you have at your organization. Um, the other thing that we've increasingly learned is that uh, leading with caregivers is something where as an organization, you probably don't know who all your caregivers are, because there are a number of people who consider themselves caregivers who don't fall into the traditional categories that we usually put them under. So when we provide caregiver support, we're not only trying to support working parents, we're also supporting working grandparents. We're supporting working professionals who are caring for their aging parents, working professionals who find themselves in the sandwich generation, who are then caught doing both, trying to support their working parents, getting them the resources and help they need, while also taking care of their own children at that inflection point of life. So all of these different intersectional identities and issues that people are facing coalesce around the one thing that they all have in common, which is that they are caring for somebody else, and that is a huge and significant part of their life. So, what can employers do to support their caregiver population? If two-thirds of all their people are caregivers, this is obviously a key issue that they need to solve for. So, we try to think through the traditional benefit bump framework of good, better, and
Mhm.
best. So, a good start is to provide access to a strong EAP. So an EAP, an employee assistance program, is great because it provides external resources that employees can opt into, that they can discover when they really need them and can reach out to get help. Uh, Key among that is that all the details about that EAP, all of the issues that are there, are clearly communicated with the work and help of a dedicated HR group. So whoever's in your HR group has to do a really active and aggressive job about making sure that there's understanding, that there's education, that everybody knows what the EAP entails, and that they can get access to those resources. And that ties into that third bullet point there, obviously, which is that all those things need to be communicated directly and frequently, frankly, so that people know that it's there and the people that are just joining understand what's there as well. So what's better than the EAP? And these are obviously building blocks. So having the AP, but then also incorporating and actively supporting a caregiver ERG. So a caregiver ERG, and like all other employee resource groups, is internally founded, is brought up through internal champions, and is focused on that particular group within the organization. Um, we work very, very closely at Kunik with ERGs and a number of our different partners. We do have partners that do not have ERGs, in which case we try to fulfill a lot of those identities and the different roles that they play. But among one of the other things that we do, we also lead the only national roundtable of caregiver ERG leaders. So that includes leaders from companies across the spectrum that are as small as 100 employees to others that, without fully disclosing who they are in the tech space and happen to share a name with a popular fruit, which historically is thought to keep people away from doctors' visits. So that those different leaders then come together and they share their best practices, what they're all doing to help their caregivers. And what we've learned is that there's a number of key pain points that come across those ERGs and what keeps them from having success and being more successful. So the biggest thing about it is the biggest thing that drives their success is having really strong alignment with their own organization's HR to make sure that they're getting the support they need, so that they're not having to spend two-thirds of their time advocating internally with HR, and then only the other third trying to figure out what's actually happening and where the pain points are among their population. So for an organization, starting and actively supporting caregiver ERG is huge. And then following that ERG's lead, whoever that person or committee may be, to coordinate and communicate among the population so that there's an understanding of where the pain points are. There's an understanding of what needs to be accomplished. And then what will naturally come from there is internal champions who will emerge, will help continue to expound upon that ERG's purpose and communication and get more members in, because membership at the end of the day is kind of the key to driving more success and influence from within an organization. What's better than that? Having the ERG, having access to an EAP, and then combining it with external support like perhaps Kunik, why we're here today. So what we can do is we can come in and actively survey to understand issues that are facing the entire population in coordination with yourself and with HR leaders there. And then we really actively coordinate resources so that we can take away a big part of the lift that happens with ERG leaders and other HR leaders and develop those resources and best practices and drive home solutions for your organization. So what do we do at Kunik? We try to drive inclusion and belonging. So obviously, as we've talked about previously, there's caregivers, there's all these different classifications of caregivers. So we work with caregivers, but we also work increasingly with managers and with other aspects and parts of an organization. So by working with this largest population within your organization, we get to interact with a significant cross section of the employees within your group. From there, we develop an understanding and we get to continue to work with HR functions to try and develop support that goes beyond simple caregiver support to the issues that are facing leadership groups, that are facing your managers, and that are facing your whole firm. So that can include DEI work, that can include other issues that are helpful. Excuse me. So caregivers and community at work, why are ERGs so important? It's very simple. Most caregivers feel that it's desperately important to have access to an ERG so that they can actually get the support that they need, but very few actually do in the current marketplace. Some of that has to do with scalability, some of that has to do with size, but a lot of it has to do with cultural issues that have traditionally not recognized caregiving as a key identity for a driving point for an organization. So while there's a wealth of ERGs across different racial identities, gender identities, other passion groups, the single largest part of your organization is probably not currently supported by an ERG, which is something we obviously feel passionate about. The issue, though, is that running an ERG is incredibly expensive. And this comes from a survey from Bentley University in the Boston suburbs. And what they found is that having an employee who runs your ERG and has to take on a single person has to take on all the responsibilities from coordinating, dealing with programming, working within HR, working within other employees on the group, that comes out to a workflow that's about 1.4 times their traditional 40-hour week. So if you're asking an individual employee to take this on as an unpaid position, it's simply not a tenable solution. You need additional help, you need additional resources, and that's obviously what we hope to provide. The reason why this is also important is because the status quo is failing. This has been well documented across all different journalistic efforts that we've seen across this fall, but 43% of new mothers leave their career within 3 months of their birth, of the birth of their child. 56% of working parents aren't happy at their current job because of the strains that they're feeling between caregiving and their work. And 70% of new fathers say fatherhood will very likely prompt a job change. And the result of these issues or these impacts is that it drives a huge cost to employers. So only 17% of companies offer new parent support programs. And that costs up to 90 to 200% of an annual salary, which comes when you have to replace an employee who might leave because of those issues that we've elucidated. Add all that up, and that comes out to about $47 billion annually in the workplace. So that's an enormous amount of lost capital that, with additional support that was more actively and aggressively brought in, might be able to be stemmed. So at Kunik, we really try and solve that through the incorporation of community, collaboration, and learning. Some of that comes through the community that we develop, where we're constantly having discussions about the issues that are facing caregivers in the workplace today. That goes across all the different partner organizations we have. We collaborate with the organization to make sure we understand where your pain points are, that we can address them actively with the kind of support sessions that we provide. And then that comes from learning. That happens both in person in these sessions, and then also with the coaching sessions and resources that we have on our platform that are available 24/7, so that people that aren't able to attend, aren't able to avail themselves of the resources that are provided in a live setting can do so on demand. The result of that is that you foster really strong connections among your employee base, and that drives significant retention. That comes through the peer network that we have, where people interact with one another. That's not only interacting with their own employers, excuse me, their own fellow employees, but also employees of other companies that that are valuing their employee base the same way that their company is. It happens through the conversations that we're discussing, these live groups and the social learning, which happens both on a peer level and on an acculturated level within individual groups that we partner with. And then with the resource library, where we have vetted experts that are providing all the kind of resources and learning tools that are needed for somebody who's looking for help over a variety of different issues. So that could be anything from babies in bottles for new parents, all the way up to college applications for teens. We've talked a lot about intersectionality. And so, how do we look at intersectionality from a programming lens, which is something that's incredibly important as we're trying to support an ERG in an organization? We look at it through two different ways. One is through a very direct caregiving focus. And a lot of the topics you'll see on the bottom there really are focused on that. So back to school, which we're doing a lot of work on now, focusing on making sure there's support for socialization and behavior, caring for ailing parents, making sure that screen time tips for children make sure that you can keep your kids on track. And then looking firm wide with larger issues that impact everybody, both caregivers and the intersections of other people who maybe are future caregivers, like the exact example that Sarah was laying out at the start of the conversation. So developing ERG listening circles like we do frequently, helping with long distance leadership as we continue to evolve in the future of work, and then working with home wellness and other issues. The final result is that using a partner like Kunik that can support your ERGs, that can support your organization, will help your people feel valued, seen, and heard. And that's our goal at the end of the day. If people come away from our service and they feel like they have been heard, they've been seen, that their organization values them a little bit better, that's something that we feel very passionate about, and that's what we try and accomplish. And so that's obviously a quote from one of our partners. This drives results. As you can see, Kunik has incredibly strong data that we use relative to traditional utilization rates of EAPs, hence the good, better, best model. It's great to have EAPs. The issue is that you need your employees to then go actively reach out for the resources they need when they're already in a crisis. By employing a resource like Kunik, you already have people that are involved in the platform because you are driving it to them and making it available to them progressively. We handle all the communication and the distribution from that. And then you end up with really strong support. So our new member retention is nearly 50%. Over 50% of people that join the platform contribute immediately and recurringly. And that's reflected in the 77% return that we have, which is much higher than any other social network. And here's why Kunik works. 77% of managers have reported that it's improved working relationships with their direct reports after engaging in our sessions. 85% of people that took part in one of our stress sessions has come away saying that it helped them increase gains and lower stress. And 92% of our partners have employees who say that they really prefer the group coaching model that we use as opposed to individual coaching sessions, which means that that's both a cost-effective and more efficacious model of getting the support that they need. So, interested in learning more? Hopefully we can help with any questions you may have here, but also would love to hear from anybody and give any answers that we can. We're a very open book and are happy to provide any support and help we can to anybody who needs it across the platform.
Yeah, thank you, Cam, so much for walking us through some of the pain points. Love to see those outcomes. And the good, better, best slide, I just like because sometimes these things are baby steps, right? We have to kind of be really mindful and planful about how to get from point A to B to C. And so I think that's really helpful for people to see sort of action items and kind of next steps. And I love that your solution supports caregivers sort of throughout their caregiving journey, from models to college applications, because parents need help kind of along the way. And BenefitBump, it's funny because our purpose statements are really similar. So we help people feel valued, included, and fulfilled. So just so many synergies there with Kunik. And we also make sure employees get connected to the resources that they need to support their growing families. So we're so excited to have you join us today. Absolutely appreciate the conversation and the next steps. Super, super helpful. And so Crosby, I know we've got about 9 minutes left and we've got some Q&A questions. So I'd love to turn it over to you, Crosby. Thanks.
Yeah, great. Once again, I want to echo Sarah's sentiments. Thank you so much, Cam, for leading us through such a great discussion. And as far as questions, I'll start with first some questions that came through during the presentation, and then I'll loop back to questions ahead of time. So one we got during the presentation is the vendor solution health advocate considered an employee resource group?
It kind of depends on the organization, but traditionally that employee resource group really needs to start internally. And it needs to be something that comes organically. So Kunik itself, for instance, as a vendor partner, we are not an employee resource group, and we're not going to pretend to be. But what we can do is we can provide a lot of the support that if an employee resource group is not something that's a scalable option for a partner at this time, we can provide a lot of that support by working really closely with you and getting to understand where some of those same issues are that might emerge organically through the support within a natural ERG.
Great, thank you. Another question that we had during the presentation is, what has been the take-up rate for your clients? The stats are great, but I'm curious what the percentage of population engaged to begin with, even if specific to a certain ERG.
That's a great question. So what we've found is that obviously we work with, there's two different ways to approach this. One has been with partners for whom they have a very dedicated identification of who their caregivers are. And I'd say for that group, we've had really, really strong take up. Usually about 70% of that population eventually joins Kunik and is active in our conversations, in our sessions and presentations. The other is a more broad model, and we're actually pretty agnostic to this because it's incredibly effective in driving inclusion across the organization. And that's to basically say, here are all the resources that are provided to Kunik for the entire organization. And then people that are interested in availing themselves of them get to opt into them at their own time. So for instance, one of our partners is a growing biotech in the Bay Area, and they do this across their entire organization. And we have a number of our most kind of devout Kunik users within this group that are not current caregivers, don't have children, are not caring for a parent, but they know it's coming. So they're very responsible. They want to be ahead of the game, exactly like Sarah was outlining at the start of this presentation. They're in their later 20s or their early 30s. They know this is something that they want to take part in. And so they want to be prepared. So, we don't want to prescribe a firm identity for who those caregivers are. But when we do have that identity, what we found is that the people that are among that group and that population take great use of Kunik.
Yeah, I really appreciate the second part of your answer because it speaks to that proactive nature of having these resource groups set up and knowing ahead of time that they're available when you need them.
Absolutely.
So another question that we had ahead of time, are there good rules of thumb for the number and types of employee resource groups to ensure that they are inclusive, but also manageable?
No, there's not, because it entirely depends on the individual organization. So, based on the size, scale, and scope of an organization, you may only have a need for 2 to 3 ERGs based on your population. But the key component of that is keeping an open mind, and particularly an open and active ear to understanding when there's a critical population that emerges that needs that support and that is calling out for it. And that's when it's very helpful to have an ERG that emerges and becomes a key component of the organization. One of our larger partners has 12 different ERGs, and they actually just founded a 13th that's particularly focused on immigrant employees, because they recognized, as much as, again, there were other parts of that cross-sectional identity that were getting support from these other ERGs, this huge part of who they are and their existence and every part of their everyday life wasn't getting active support internally from colleagues. So they wanted to make sure that that group was identified and that they were able to kind of rally together and get the support that they need.
So it sounds like it's important to always evaluate the resource groups you have and modify them and adapt to your employee population as your employee population evolves over time.
Absolutely, on an ongoing and rolling basis. And that's the kind of thing, again, that an external vendor can help with, to make sure that they understand what the whole population looks like, and looks for those opportunities. And also, with the kind of survey data that we take constantly, you get to understand where there might be an issue and where there might be a need for one of those groups that's emerging.
Great. So we're close to time. I want to make sure I get to one more question that we had come in to the chat during this Q&A session. Are there any employee resource groups that Kunik will not support?
No. So we're happy to work with any employee resource group. Again, like we are focused at our core around caregivers, but we really want to make sure that we solve for the issues that any of our partners have. So we've done a significant amount of DE&I work to help with those ERGs in a variety of different modes and modalities. And we've worked with a number of other ERGs focused on individual issues. We're working with an ERG that's focused on Native American issues next month for a session with one of our partners, and that happens on an ongoing basis. So we're always working with leaders who are focused on DE&I and all those resources, and collaborating with ERG leaders as well, sometimes trying to bring those two groups that are even internal together so that we can make sure that we're providing the resources and the kind of learning and educational experiences that are most impactful for a company's organization.
All right, well, that was a very robust Q&A. Lots of good questions and lots of great responses. So we'll just wrap up super briefly. BenefitBump, working together with Kunik, ensures easy access to available resources for growing families, including employee resource groups offered by employers. Please reach out if you have any questions, if you'd like to learn more about BenefitBump and Kunik, working together to create a better experience for your caregivers. So contact information is on the slide. Thanks so much, Cam. We really appreciate the discussion today. It's been great to have you with us.
Thank you all for having me. Appreciate it. And as spoken earlier by Sarah and certainly myself, would love to answer any other questions anybody has with the context there.
Sounds great. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week. Bye.